This month's four-way challenge is a set of at least 3 stackable boxes proposed by Tomislav. What I see as the biggest challenge here is coming up with a design for stackable boxes. I've only turned one stackable box before. It only had two levels. The other challenge, another challenge, is coming up with a large enough suitable piece of fairly dry wood. I've come up with this piece of Bradford pear, which is 6.5 inches across and 10.5 inches tall. It's got a few minor cracks, but I'm hoping I can work through it. It's been covered in a tarp for several years outside, and I think it's fairly dry. Other challenges include lots of end grain hollowing and jam chucking and rechucking. Let's see how I did it. All right, let's start with process steps. Number one is coming up with a basic design, and then I believe if it's a complex project like stackable box that's got a number of essential or sequential steps, I think making a sketch is really critical. Several years ago, I was writing an article on thread chasing, and Kirk DeHeer shared some pictures of his a set of stackable boxes he had done with thread chasing, and as I looked at those pictures, it got me thinking a little bit about design, and I decided I would come up with a Christmas tree. When I started turning about 17 years ago and started turning some boxes, I found this book by a guy you might have heard of called Richard Raffin, and I bought his book called Turning Boxes. And one of the things that was very helpful to me, and I even have that page tabbed, is on page 91, he had a list, a step-by-step guide to turning end-grain boxes that had 25 steps. And I couldn't remember all those steps, so I wound up making a copy of that page. And every time I turned a box, I would go through it step by step to keep the sequence right. Because if you get the sequence off, you'll go past a step where you can't come back. Like if you part off the top of a box and eliminate the ability to chuck it, you can't go back and refine or sand or decorate the inside. That's just an example. So I mount the blank between centers. This is uneven, so I need to get it flat, and then I need to add a tenon to it. So first thing I want to do is get it squared up, trued up. So I'm going to use a beating and parting tool to start on the narrowest side and just start cleaning it up. It's a pretty heavy blank, so I'm going to slowly bring up the speed. It's about 800. Just take multiple passes. Okay, I've got it reasonably flat. Now I need to mark the tenon that I'm going to be using. I'm going to see if I can't use this device to kind of get a rough idea. Alright, that's just about spot on. I incline it just slightly to get a dovetail to match the largest set of jaws that I have, and that's good. Now I'm going to do the other side. I like to do the parting off here, so I'm just going to reverse this. Essentially, I do the same thing on this side, but I'm going to use a different tenon size. So using the largest jaw set I have, which has an opening about needs about a 4.5 inch tenon, I put this in because I want to clean up the end of this. Then I'll reverse it and clean up the other end, because you never know when you get near the end of the box
you don't want any divots or damage. So using a 1/2 inch spindle gouge, I'm going to carefully just kind of trim off the end to make it slightly concave. Extend a 10-inch plank, there's a lot of leverage, so there's going to be a little bit of vibration. And I reverse it and clean up the other end. So now I lay out all the parts for the 4 boxes and the top section. I've got those measured, so I'm going to use calipers, and I've got them long enough. My goal is to have them long enough to include the tenon as well as enough room for a parting cut. So this first one is 2.15 inches. I've got 4 different parting cuts, but in addition I'm going to hit the tenon and then a parting cut, so it could get confusing about these lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where that tenon is going to be for the next box. But I'm going to go ahead and part it in half and then take an extra, the parting cuts on each blank so they're smaller, so I've got a little more stability. I have a soft touch here so that won't damage the end but gives it some additional lateral support. I'm using a 1/4 inch parting tool. Okay, so I'm going to use this to part off this one, and I'm going to use this one to part off this one, and then I'll use this to part off that one. Okay, so now we got that straight. I'm going to use start off with a 1/8 inch parting tool and then drop to a 16. So I'm going to part off here. As I go deep, it starts binding, so then I'm going to switch to a thinner parting tool. Alright, now I'm down a ways. I'm going to go ahead and use a saw. And I want to give a shout out to viewer NHaste6910 who suggested, after watching my video where I slammed the saw into the lathe bed, about sticking a piece of wood under there. It's like, yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for that. Okay. So now's the opportunity to go ahead and size the tenon on box number 2. So I'm going to do that by using the 1/4 inch parting tool to bring it down, and I've got caliper set to 4.5 inches, and I'll just check it periodically. looks like I've got it. Okay, now I'll part it off at the bottom of that tenon. And as before, I'll make that final cut with a saw. I marked the top and the bottom diameters of box number 1. And I'll go from here down to here at a slight slope. This is where most of the wood needs to come away, so that's what I deal with first. Okay, I like that. I think that's just about where it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and nip this corner here. There we go. I don't think I'm going to bother to sand yet because there may be some difference. Now the recess for this box is going to be the same size tenon it's on this, which is about 4.5. So let's go ahead and mark that. Lay that on here, and it's just outside that dark area, somewhere along here. And I can tell that wall thickness is going to be way too thick. This wood is drier than I thought, so I think instead of having to hollow it out, let it sit a while, I think I'm just going to go for it and do each box, because there is no moisture whatsoever. All the chips are hot and dry, so I think it's dry enough. Before I start hollowing, I want to drill a depth hole. So I want to start a little divot here first with a skew. Minimize the wandering. So I'm using a 1/4 inch drill bit. I measure it like this on the side. I see a mark that tells me how deep to go. Make sure I got the right mark. There we go. Got several marks. I better double check. Okay, there's that. Little rest again. I'm initially going to start hollowing with a 1/2 inch spindle gouge going from the center out. Cutting, starting on center, so let's lower the tool rest just a little bit. Make sure everything is nice and tight. Okay, this kind of hollowing, I think I'm going to resort to a square scraper. So I started at the center and worked my way back, just cutting down no more than 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch at a time, with the handle slightly raised. Sweep across. The tricky part is going to get this to the right alignment that I don't undersize the next box. I've still got hollowing to do, so I'm not going to get too concerned about that yet. I checked for flatness where the next box is going to go, and I need to take it down just a little bit, so I'm going to use a shear scraper and just take that inside down a bit. And that looks pretty clean. I'm good with that. I've got a little more hollowing to do, but I'll worry about that later. I'm getting a little bit of tear out, so I'll have to figure out a way to deal with that. Let's go ahead and get this sized for box number, fit box number 2. And just to get a sense of it, That's just a little bit smaller, and so I'm almost there. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to resort to a fine tuning box scraper, one with a negative rate. So I'm going to use this one with a sharp corner and just come down there just a little bit. This is going to be a loose, somewhat loose fit box, but I don't want it sloppy. And actually, almost overshot it. I would have liked to have had that as a jam chuck, but I can put something in there to jam chuck it to get the profile. So what I think I want to do is take this down, slope it a little bit more, since I've got plenty of wall thickness here. And I'm going to undercut this a little bit on the hollowing process. I've coated the inside with sanding lubricant just to soften it up, make it a little easier to not get tear out. But I'm going to bring these walls in a little bit using a box scraper that's got a rounded corner. And let's see what kind of scraper I want to get to clean that bottom up with. A bit of a dimple in the bottom. I'll use I think this shear scraper will probably handle that. I want something with a longer handle though. That's just not enough leverage. I'll just use this large round bowl scraper to just get in the center. That worked real well. I'll do some hand sanding along the walls, and now I'm going to finish up, smoothing up the bottom a little bit with a disc sander. I go through all the grits. After I sand up to about 320, I rub a little abrasive paste on it on the inside. Gives it a nice silky, waxy smooth with a very pleasant smell from the beeswax. And then turn on a slow speed and speed up as you sand. I've decided I'm going to texture the outside of this with a texturing wheel, the Sorby large wheel. So I'm going to bring it in vertical, got the tool rest in alignment with the outside, and I've got it sanded to the final finish of about 320, 360. And now I'm just going to come in and bring it across. Lift it up a little bit so I don't get too much of a pattern going. Let's see how it looks. And it's subtle. I'd like it to be a little bolder than that, so I'm going to just incline this just slightly off the vertical. And I think that's achieved the look that I want. So I use one of these green abrasive pads. Just knock off the frizzies, burnish it a little bit. So that essentially finishes the bottom of the tree, or bowl one. So let's go ahead and go to box number 2, which is going to be a very similar process using the tenon we already have on there. I set the upper and the lower diameters for the box, and then I use a 5/8 with a parting tool. I'm going to use a 5/8 inch spindle gouge to shape that curve between them. Noticed 1 or 2 small cracks, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal those a little with some CA glue, but first I want to use a little sanding sealer around the edges just so it won't stain. Put that any place where I feel like it's going to, the CA glue is going to run down and possibly stain. Just rub it around. That dries almost instantly down here. So let's start with the biggest crack first. Just seal it like that. Now just pinch up some of this. Touch it on there. And then I'm going to take a coarse piece of 100 grit and just sand that surface. And come back and do it again if I have to. Usually this takes care of shallow cracks. And I've got a little tiny one right here. Do the same. I start the hollowing process for the second box with a 1/4 inch hand drill bit. And then I use a spindle gouge to start opening up the center before I resort to a square end scraper to do the bulk of the hollowing. Well, that was exciting. And the reason is I got a little sloppy with my tenon on this side. It wasn't flat. I knew I had a gap here. I felt like it would hold, but it doesn't look like it did. So I'm going to open this up, grab it like this, clean that up, and finish. I've got a different set of jaws in mind, so I remounted on the original, knowing it's not the best fit, but I've just got to come in here and make this a little bit wider for that other set of jaws, and I think it'll work temporarily. Got to make a slight, very slight dovetail. Make it very easy. I think that'll do it. Now I can use this as a recess with those other set of jaws and clean this up. So I've got this set of jaws that will fit in this recess temporarily. I avoid this because a recess in end grain has a tendency to split, but this is fairly wide. It's not going too deep, and it's only a temporary use. I'm going to go very light, so let's cross our fingers. There's always a way to get us out of a jam. So I just tighten it where it's just snug, not enough to split it open, and I've just got to clean up this face. This is less than 90 degrees. It was sloppy work on my part. But in any case, we needed to come down on the bottom and clean this up anyway. So we're going to take advantage of this cleaning up the bottom as we square this up. Okay, I've got it sanded. But I see a few little sanding areas that could use a little more work, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use that tool Richard Raffin and Tommy use a lot with little knots, the refiner, and I'm just going to come in there and make a little decorative area on those areas. Right there. Right here. And I don't want to get too fussy with it, but that'll help clean up the bottom a little bit. Okay, I put a new burr on my scraper. Try not to get as aggressive, take off a little bit less. I'm going to switch to a box scraper now to refine that opening to 4 1/4 inches, and then we'll size the tenon on the next box to match. Smaller skew, a little easier to get in there. Alright, got a very nice surface at the bottom. Won't need much sanding. I'll go ahead and sand this, and we'll start on the next step. I sanded it inside and out, use abrasive paste on the inside. Now I'm going to go ahead and texture the outside of this one like last time. I'm just going to tilt it just a little bit. Speed about 500. The frizzies, furnish it. Okay, I removed bowl 2, and I've added the blank for box 3, 4, and the top, using the top tenon on the headstock. This is going to be box 3. We're going to kind of clean out the bottom, and then we're going to size the tenon. Half-inch spindle. I've set calipers generously for that, so now we're just going to mark it and feel where it is. Almost right there on the mark. So let's leave it a little bit. And spot on. So, okay, we've completed box 3. The challenge is the boxes get smaller. You've got to go to a different chuck size. I'm switching to this one for box number 4. I've already done the recess to fit that. We may have to come back and refine the walls later. So I've measured that recess. We're going to go ahead and mark it. I thought I'd use the bottom of the last box just to do a little texturing on. So I'm going to put a little bit of a rosette in the bottom. Turn the speed down to no more than 400 or so. And then we're going to bring this in real close. That looks good. Okay. And we use a point tool. Kind of kick it up a little bit. Okay. Now we got a nice rosette, and I think we're going to put a little something out here as well. I'm going to put some texturing with the Dremel burr tool, but first we need to make a little bit of a cove here, so let's do that. And then let's text that up with a little bit of sandpaper. 200, 360. Now we're going to use our Dremel burr tool. Drop the tool rest. And speed-wise, it's not too bad. Just going to put this in there. And that looks good. And then again, we're going to punch that up a little bit by using the point tool to frame it. And there we go. Okay, here we go. Here's the bottom of box number 4. This will be the first box someone would take off to look at, so I think that was one that's appropriate to decorate the bottom. Okay, I parted off box number 4. Now I'm going to leave the very top lid and the topper mounted because we're going to size this to fit the 4th box. So let's just go ahead and leave it in the chuck. We're going to switch chucks. Hopefully this painter's tape will reduce the chances of a mark because it is certainly not optimum size. But I've got to have it opened up fairly wide to accommodate this design. I shape the outside, I hollow the inside, I sand it, and then I do a little texturing, a little detail to the inside. That's all the detail I'm going to cover here. And there's the decoration after using a bit of abrasive paste to wax it and polish it. The white spots are actually spalting in this Bradford pear, and they're a little bit soft. Okay, I've remounted the top of the lid blank, the very top of the blank, and I'm going to clean up the bottom a little bit before I measure the tenon. Okay. Now the recess is going to be that wide, so let's see where that is. Look, that's too small. That's closer to it right there. Okay. Let's put this tenon down. We're going to mount in the chuck and size it for the box number 4. So I'm going to use the beading and parting tool for that. I want that to be just about 1/4 inch, and that's probably pretty close. Okay, before I do the whole tenon, let's check it. I left this mounted in a chuck because we may have to get back to it to refine the outside shape and to put that little texturing on the outside. A little looser than I wanted. Got in too big a hurry. Alright, so I'm going to hollow this out a little bit, not a whole lot. Half inch, and we're just going to come back and open it up. Kind of look at the picture. I don't want to open it up too much because it's going to have a slope. I've got to decide whether I'm going to add the ball as an extra feature, and I got a feeling I will because I think it needs to be a little bit taller than the blank I have here, so I'll probably wind up making that separately. Inch wide. I don't want this lid too heavy, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up some even more. Oh, still got a ways to go. I want to go deep, don't want to open it up too wide because that slope. Alright, I'm going to switch tools. I'm going to switch to a tool I don't use a lot, but it works great on end grain, especially if it's a little bit punky like some of these spalted spots are. It is a cupped carbide tool. This is Mike Hunter's Viceroy tool, and I use this when I really need something to get a clean cut against some soft wood. Okay, I've decided I may want to rechuck this thing with an expansion from the inside, so I'm going to just cut a little dovetail here. Something that could look decorative. So now I've got a recess. I'll finish sanding this off, and we'll be ready to turn it around and start doing the final shaping on it. So here's where I am on the boxes. I think this one's got to come down some. I think this one has to come in a little bit. This one's got to come in a little bit. So I'm going to put those back on the big chuck, and then we'll come back to finishing the top. Okay, this the bottom outside diameter has got to be just about this size or a little bit smaller. So let me take a spindle roughing gout and see if I can't get some of that wood off pretty quick. Okay, now the challenge to this is to make this look like a top of the tree, and it's got to come in all the way to, you know, somewhere around here where I'm going to put a ball on it. Okay, I've got a lot of wood in here. Instead of rounding it over, I need to scallop it in like the other branches. So, speed up a little bit. Okay, sand it and texture it, got to drill a hole, turn the knob. So I'm going to drill a 5/8 inch hole about a 1/2 inch deep for the peg for the ball. Going slow. are. Okay, got a nice textured effect on there. I gotta say, this stackable box was probably the most challenging of the four-way videos, collaboration videos that we've done to date, at least for me. But it was a lot of fun and an interesting project. And I hope you'll check out the videos of the other members of the collaboration team: Sam Angelo, Richard Raffin, and Tomislav Tomasec. And we appreciate your comments and suggestions. Put them in the comments below. And remember, y'all stay safe. Come on back. You hear?